So this should be an honors class, but he's out of town, so he requested me to step in for him. So I invite you for a silent word of prayer. Amen. I think the last Sabbath of the year, I was trying and do some recap of what I've been doing, a series of mini classes. So if you remember, I was trying to explain more about the history of the seventh kingdom. So I was able to draw a structure like this. So before I draw the structure, just to give a recap. So we have been trying to understand July 18, 2024. And I think we have had proofs given to justify why July 18. And of the many proofs, one of the proofs I was able to deal with was the rise and fall of kingdoms. And I think the last class that I had, I wanted to deal with this concept of the rise and fall of kingdoms. Being one of the proofs for July 18, so we need to understand that subject. And second, when you look at the structure that I was about to draw now, so we understand, so this is the rise and fall of kingdoms. So this is one of the subjects that has been tackled to give more proof and more weight to the understanding, one, of July 18, 2024. So whatever happened in July 18, 2024 has something to do with the rise and fall of kingdoms. And number two, what you're going to see, it is that it contributes more to the understanding of the tests of the Sunday law. Bearing in mind, if this is 2001, this is the Waymark Sunday law, and this is the Waymark clause of probation. So this dispensation, we are being tested on equality. And because this is a dispensation, we are now in a new dispensation. This is where we stand in history. And what we expect is an unsealing of a message here that increases in knowledge and is going to test us. And we are going to see that it more deals with the seventh kingdom. So again, if you want to understand about the history of the seventh kingdom, you also need to understand the subject of the rise and fall of kingdoms. So that's what I was trying to do in my last class. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time. So I'm going to pick from here. I'm not going to do a recap in details about it. So I'm going to pick from here, and then we'll try to see where we end up getting to. So the first thing I want us to have at the back of our minds, and this is not a new concept. So one thing I want us to see is that the book of Daniel is the book of Revelation. So there are many ways you can be able to justify this claim. But based on my subject, what I want us to see is that when you go to the book of Daniel, it explains to us, if you go by Daniel's words, from the first kingdom to the fourth kingdom. So at least in a basic level, Daniel gives us 4 kingdoms. But when you go to the book of Revelation, it deals with the 5th, the 6th, and the what? So Daniel gives us 4 kingdoms, Revelation gives us 3 kingdoms, and total, how many kingdoms do we have? 7 kingdoms. So if you want to understand the subject of the rise and fall of kingdoms, you cannot only stop at Daniel because it only gives you half of the history. You need to go to the book of Revelation and realize that it repeats and enlarges these kingdoms that Daniel gives us and explains more better about the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th. I'm not negating the fact that you would still go to Daniel and see the 5th kingdom. But at least through Daniel's words, he only says 4 beasts, 4 kingdoms. So, and Revelation explicitly distinguish all of them to give us a total of 7 kingdoms. So that's the first thing I want us to see. And then, because we want to understand about the rise and fall of kingdoms, and we are more interested into the understanding of this kingdom, I want us to also put into remembrance another concept that I tried to explain here. That when you go to the book of Revelation chapter 12, you're going to see it's the same as the book of Revelation chapter 13, and it's the same as the book of Revelation chapter 17. It's very imperative, very important to understand this concept, because there are some of the concepts given in Revelation 12 that are not in the other portions, or some in 13 and some in 17 that lack in other portions. You need to combine all these thoughts to understand the history of kingdoms. And one of the concepts I wanted to pick, and I picked in my last class, was that when you go to the book of Revelation 12, you're going to see it's a controversy. There is a woman, and this woman is fighting against a what? Against a dragon. And this dragon has 7 heads and how many horns? And 10 horns. And a very important perspective, when you come to the 7 heads, it's here where you find what? Crowns on the 7 heads. When you go to, so this is into brackets, this is a pure woman. When you go to Revelation 13, in Revelation 13, I'm going to repeat the very same thing I said. You're going to see it speaks of a beast. But when you look closely, let me do it this way. It speaks of people we call saints, and it's the saints that are in a conflict with the beast. And this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. Then Revelation 17, the same concept. We have the saints, and they are in a conflict with a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. So in the story of Revelation 13, you'll actually see that the crowns are here. In Revelation 12, the crowns are there. It's the 7 heads with the crowns. Here, it's the 10 horns with the crowns. But when you go to Revelation 17, another entity is added. There is a woman, and I'm going to put into brackets, a whore. So what you need to do is a good compare and contrast. And I've always said, when you use compare and contrast, we use it to dig missing information. So when you look at Revelation 17, you are given of a woman riding on a beast. So you need to realize that as much as Revelation 13 does not tell you so, if they are the same, you need to know that on this beast, there must be a whore riding, and on this dragon, there must be a whore riding. You fill the gaps. And to give a second testimony to this, if you look at this dragon here, and come to this concept, because I know it's not the first time we have tackled the book of Revelation. This is the 4th kingdom. It primarily represents the kingdom of Rome, the 4th kingdom. And when you go to the concept that I also established in my last class, that if you at all need to understand these chapters in connection to the kingdoms of Bible prophecy, you need to understand the two perspectives that John is going to give us. Number one, John will give us the panoramic view. This is the complete vision. And then John is also going to give us the dispensational view. So there are 7 kingdoms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there are 7 kingdoms. But John will give us a glimpse of one of the kingdoms. And what you need to do again is to realize that the concepts in the history of the fifth, those properties that are here in the history of the fifth, you will find the very same properties in the history of the fourth, the third, the second, and the first. So when you come to the history of the fifth, John gives us a glimpse that in the history of the fifth kingdom, there is a woman, and a woman is riding here. So if this is the perspective we have on the fifth, it should be the same for the fourth. There is a woman who should be riding on the fourth beast, or whatever you want to call it, the head. So you need to compare and contrast and realize, if the woman is on the fifth, the woman is on all the 7. So if this is the fourth kingdom, you'll actually realize that there is a woman entity here, as it is here, as it is on the second and the first. So you just fill the gaps. Maybe the question I want us to ask ourselves, and maybe we'll try to answer at the end of the class. When you look at Revelation 12, you have crowns on the history of the 7. You have crowns on the history of the 10 horns. But when you go to Revelation 17, they are not what? I don't know whether you have identified that issue. There are no crowns on either the 7 heads or the 10 horns. And the question is, why? So we will try to answer that question. It's the same story, but it is giving us different perspectives. And there is a reason for that. So the first point I want us to see is that there must be a woman riding on the beast of Revelation 12, 13, and 17. And it is the story of the controversy. In the history of Revelation 12, you have a pure woman. So you could identify in Revelation 13 who is the pure woman. It's the saints. And the history of 17, who is the pure woman? Saints. So you can really see, you begin to feel missing information, and it begins to become an interesting story because it becomes the story of the great controversy. And if you remember, I also tried to show, when you come and dig deeper in this story of Revelation 12, Revelation 12 is what? Genesis what? It's Genesis 3. So in Genesis 3, God is going to say, I'm going to put what? Between who and who? So there is the serpent and the what? And the woman. And in this story, it's the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman in conflict. So when you go to 12, what do you see? The serpent, now called the dragon, versus who? So the woman wants to give birth to a child. So the serpent will try to do what? To bite the heel of the seed of the woman, while the seed of the woman will crush the head of the seed of the serpent. What you actually see in Revelation 12 is a dynamical display of that story. So the woman here in Genesis 3 receives a curse. You shall have travel in birth, right? So what is the woman doing in Revelation 12? She is in travel in birth. And the dragon is in wait once the child is born to devour the seed of the woman. So it's the story. And I was saying, when you look at this story in 12, I didn't have time. I hope Mangi still has the fresh mind. We were trying to take the same story back to where? You take the same story back to where? To heaven. And you see the same dynamic. We will talk about this. You are going to see, this is Lucifer. In Revelation 12, he is called the what? The dragon. And Lucifer, the dragon, is in a conflict with who? Michael the prince. You'll still go to the same story and see the same players, same issue, same history. But I'm not planning to do this today. But I just want us to see that it's the story of the great controversy that you are dealing with here. So, and I've also said, when you look at the panoramic view and the dispensational view, you need to realize that John gives us the two perspectives. He will address the history of the seven. So come to Revelation 13. When you compare Revelation 13 and 17, in Revelation 13, it becomes complex and tactical. Why? It does not tell you that the beasts are dispensational. They are progressive. It only speaks of a kingdom with how many heads? 7 heads and 10 horns. But when you compare with the thoughts given in Revelation 17 is the one that gives you the ability to realize that these kingdoms will be sequential, one after another. So it's looking at the structural setup of 13 and 17 and realizing that 13 denies you information that is so evident in 17. It's 17 that shows you 5 are fallen, 1 is, the other one will come. So it gives you the ability to see that they are progressive kingdoms from kingdom number 1 to kingdom number 7. But at the same time, John will also deal with one kingdom, give you good information on one specific kingdom, and as a student of prophecy, what do? You can use this information to understand about the 6, or to understand about the 7, or to understand about the first. So it does not give you information on all of them. Principally, these properties on the 5th, you can use them to understand the history of the 7. And that's the purpose of using the panoramic and the dispensational view. So you are given something that will aid you in understanding more information about the other kingdoms. So I want us to go to the Bible now. So when you go to the book of Revelation chapter 17, so the first thing I want us to see is to identify where the prophet stands. It's where the prophet stands in history. And I'm going to put into brackets that John is going to time travel to somewhere. We'll know where. It's not a new concept in the Bible. A prophet is literally in Shushan, the palace, but he's taken in vision to a different place and begins to see the unraveling of events at that particular moment. And if I would remember and re-echo Elder Jeff's words, that when a prophet behaves in such a manner, he becomes a symbol in representation of those particular people at that particular time where he goes. So if a prophet comes, an example, into the history of the 7, and he begins to explain to us how this history looks like, he's no longer John. He represents people who exist at that time. He is telling us how this history looks like, and it is our duty and responsibility to unfold that information to understand better about that particular history. So when you go to Revelation chapter 17 verse 1, and I'm going to repeat the same words that were re-echoed on the last class again. So we need to understand when we come to the understanding of the Bible, 90% these are just words. But there is the 10% that is very important, the structures. It's by being able to combine the two concepts that you can be able to encode a lot of information that is not so visible by just reading the words. So when I begin reading Revelation 17 from verse 1, and I'm going to read, and there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying, Come hither. So when you go to the previous verse, the previous chapter, you will see angels of the 7 vials. And it's one of the angels who come and tell John, Come hither. So the first concept I want us to pick is come hither. And the question I will ask myself, so it's come here, and the question I'll ask myself is what? The question I'll ask myself is what? Where? Are we together? So come here, and I will show you something. So question, what is the angel intending to show John? I will show you the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many. So whatever John is to be shown is what? Judgment of the. So who is the angel focusing on? The whore. Can we agree to that? I'm going to show you the judgment of the what? So whatever John wants to be shown is the judgment of the what? Of the whore. So up to that point, I want to suggest that the angel is more focused on the whore. I will show you the judgment of this whore who sits upon many waters. And then the verse continues in verse 2 and it says, with whom? So when you look at verse 1, part B, the judgment of the whore. So verse 1 speaks about what? The whore, and this whore is going to sit upon what? Many waters. So this is verse 1. The whore sitting upon many waters. Then go to verse 2. What does it say? With. So who is the whom? Yes? Who is the whom? Can you see it's the whore? So verse 2 continues. So if I would put a structure here, I would say the whore. This is verse 1. I don't know how to set it up. Let me see. So this is verse 1. And verse 1, we have the whore. Verse 2, who is the whore? Whom? Can you see that? So the whore is going to sit upon many waters. So I want us to see that the whore becomes whom in verse 2. Can you really see that? With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So when you come to part 2, it speaks about 2 entities, which now we need to identify whether they are a repeat and enlarge or they are 2 different things. With whom, so this whom I'm going to put is also her. So with whom, when it deals with the whom, it speaks about what? Kings of the earth. And when it speaks of her, it speaks of what? An inhabitants of the earth. So the connection between the whore and the inhabitants is drinking wine, and with the kings is what? Commit what? Commit fornication. So up to that point, you cannot identify whether the inhabitants are the kings of the earth. But you need to understand how repeat and enlarge works. So if I would repeat the same statement from verse 1 and give it different names in verse 2, is it repeat and enlarge? It's repeat and repeat. Enlarge means you give more what? So in verse 1, it does not mention this entity of kings. Can you really see that? It only mentions waters. And when you go to verse 15, because verse 15 will tell you who the many waters are, we will get to there, you're going to see that verse 2 gives us more information. That the woman does not just sit on waters, but it also has a relationship with the what? The kings of the earth. So verse 1 and verse 2 gives us a new entity, the kings of the earth, which is not given in verse 1. That's why it's called repeat and enlarge. More information is given, a different entity is introduced. Can you really see that? So what we need to unravel and uncode is what is the relationship between this whore and the inhabitants and the aspect of drinking wine, and what is the relationship between this whore and the kings and the aspect of committing fornication. Are we together? So we need to uncode the relationship between this and this. But there is another important bit I want us to see. The aspect of sitting. What is to sit? Sit. So the woman seems to be sitting. And when I go throughout the book of Revelation 17, you are going to see 17 verse 1. 17 verse 1, it says, there is a woman, this one, there is a whore, and she's going to sit upon what? Many waters. So that's the first place you find the word sit. The second place you find the word sit is Revelation 17:3. 17:3, what does it say? Someone can read that for me. So, yes. So in 17:3, it speaks of a woman sit upon a what? A scarlet beast with 7 heads, and that's the second place you find the word sit. The third place you find the word sit is 17 from verse 9. Someone can read. What does it say? Yes. So there is a woman here, and the woman is going to sit on what? 7 heads, which are 7 mountains. Sindio? So the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman, and the last place you find the word sit is 17 verse what? 15. Someone can read. And I'm also going to put 18 there. Uh-huh. So here, these waters are the multitudes. Multitudes what? People, nations, and tongues. And when you go to 18, it tells you the whole is the great city. So this is just the explanation. So what you see is that there are 4 places where the woman sits. And when you come to the 7 heads here, we are told that these 7 heads are what? They are kings, and they are also called what? Mountains. So when you do a good observation, what you're going to see is that when you look at this second part, 9 and 15, they are just explanations of the symbols, because when you go to 9 and 10, it actually explains to you who are the 7 heads. It tells you there are 7 kings and gives you more information on who these kings are. When you go to 15, 18, it tells you who the whore and the waters are. So in other words, this first verse here, the symbology is explained here. And when you read this explanation, the word sit here is defined as what? When you read these verses, to rule. Can you see that? Reign, exactly. To reign. So the word sit is to reign. You can begin to see that. So, and you can now say that this is this. Maybe it's not a chiasm, it's my observation. But I want us to see the word sit is to reign. And maybe you can go extra and ask yourself, what is to reign? Are we together? So the connection that we now need to understand is that there is a whole here who reigns or who rules. I'm going to put to reign as to rule. I hope that is not, I hope this is the correct synonym for reign. And I want us to see that this woman, this whore here, is ruling over the inhabitants, the people, the nations, the tongues. And we need to understand how that chemistry works. Because when you look at the first two verses, the whore here has connections with the kings of the earth, has connections with the inhabitants of the earth. And I want us to see there is a distinguishing factor between inhabitants and kings. Because as we are going to see, kings, what do kings do? What do kings do? What do kings do? They rule over the inhabitants. Are we together? They rule or they reign over the inhabitants. But in the story, because the focus is the whore, what is the whore doing? From verse 1. What is the whore doing? Over who? Inhabitants. Are we together? So it's as if the whore has replaced the kings and she's the one ruling over the inhabitants. Can you really see that? So we need to see there is a connection. And it's because the inhabitants are drunk with wine, and it's because the kings have committed fornication. We will come back to that. So we want to understand the connection between the woman, kings, and the inhabitants. Yes. Sit. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. I didn't use the dictionary. I just said there is a symbol given in Revelation 17:1, and the symbol is explained in the same verses. So I just used the explanation given by the Bible. I didn't go to the concordance. That to reign is to sit. It uses that concept by looking at the verse. I didn't go to the interpretation. Yes. I didn't go to the, I've never thought of going to the dictionary. I hope, can you say what it means? G2521, to sit down. So to sit means, come again? To, to dwell, fixed. There is the one who said fixed what? Abode. Okay. So ni kama mtu to sit ni kuishi. Okay. I don't know, because it just clicked into my mind when you go to Revelation, not Revelation, Matthew 20, is it 23, where Christ condemns the Pharisees. And they say the Pharisees do what? They sit on Moses' seat. And what does the word sit there mean? Matthew, it's verse 1. Is it 23 or 24? 23 from verse 1 and 2. The Pharisees, they sit on Moses' seat. What does that mean? It means to rule. Ulinipea maji ilienda wapi? Oh. So when you go to the meaning of that sitting there, what does it mean? Anyone with an idea? So, yes? In place of. I wouldn't be against that. To? To confer a kingdom on someone. So basically, I hope we can agree to this idea that they do Moses' work, right? So what was the work of Moses? To teach the law, sindio, and to administer judgment, right? So when the Pharisees administer the law and judgment and teach it, what do? It's as if they sit on Moses. So Moses ruled over the people. If you have a case, Moses deals with the dispute. Moses teaches. So they do Moses' work. So I will derive the same concept that the word sit here, I'm not against the dictionary concept, but just by looking at how the Bible is fond of using the word sit, it shows like to be a rule. So we want to understand the connection between the woman, the kings, and the inhabitants. So this woman here, we are saying, has a connection between the kings of the earth and the inhabitants of the earth. So the woman connected to the kings of the earth is through fornication. The kings commit fornication. And the woman connection to the inhabitants of the earth is to do what? The drinking of the what? Of her wine. So we want to understand the connection between these two. So, and I have also tried to explain there is a connection between the kings and the inhabitants. And this is to rule or to control or to reign. The kings control the inhabitants, they rule, they reign. But in the story, the woman, if sit is to reign, the woman seems to be sitting on the inhabitants, or the woman seems to be controlling or ruling over the inhabitants. Yet, it is the work of the kings to rule over the inhabitants of the earth. So, what has happened? So, and I want us to see first connection between the woman and the kings. I hope you understand synonymously the kings is the beast, the woman riding, sitting on a beast. And I want us to see the interaction between the woman and the beast. So I want us to see the woman and the kings. So we know the kings are beasts. According to the parable, the woman sitting on the beast. We will come and deal with the woman sitting on waters later. So when we speak of a woman, this is a human being. And this beast, I would say, is a what? An animal. Maybe you'd even ask yourself a question. Why would God use this parable of a woman sitting on a what? A beast. A woman controlling a beast. So, and I want us to see, when you go to the book of Ecclesiastes 3:18, maybe we can read that. Ecclesiastes 3 from 18 to 21. Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 So from verse 18, I want you to read up to verse 21. Just finish 22. So when you go to the book of Ecclesiastes, is it Solomon or who wrote Ecclesiastes? He tries to compare a beast and a what? A human being. And he tries to show as if there are no big differences, and also tries to show we know that there are differences. So he begins by asking, for that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth the beast. Whatever happens to a human being also happens to a what? To a beast. Even one thing befalleth them. As one dies, what happens to the other? The other dies. One has a breath, and the other one has also a breath. They all live. And a human being has no preeminence over a beast. All is vanity. All go into one place. All are dust, and to dust they do what? They return. Who knows the spirit of a man that goeth upward, and the spirit of a beast that goeth downwards to the earth? So when you try to read, one thing that Ecclesiastes tries to demonstrate to us, there is no what? There is no what? There is no difference. Can you really see that? But we can go to another story. Which story? Genesis chapter 1, in the story of creation. And what does Genesis do? What does it show us? There is a what? There is a difference. Actually, when you go to Genesis, who bears the rule over the other? Human beings, yes, human being, they bear rule. They bear rule over the animals, right? But according to Ecclesiastes, they are no different. Each does its own things. A human being, they have their own life, which is actually no different from a beast's life. Can you really see that? So there are two perspectives that I really want us to see. One perspective is telling us there is no difference, but the other perspective tells us there is a what? They think different. They think differently. They act differently, and actually, there are many examples actually would give to show there is a difference between a beast and a human being. And the story that we are dealing with is a story that is dealing with a human being and a what? An animal. So we need to first look at the basic level. And in this story between a human being and an animal, the story is that this human being is bearing rule over the what? Over the animal. And this aspect of bearing rule, whether you want to call it seat, we need to ask ourselves one important question. When we speak about the word seat or this bearing rule, is it through force or through consent? Is the woman controlling the beast through force, or is the beast willing to be ruled or to be sat on? Are we together? And the moment we start uncoding all that, then we'll be able to understand what all this means to us. Tuko pamoja? So we need to ask ourselves, we can go to the Bible stories and realize there are differences between beasts and animals and human beings. And this is the perspective I want us to carry along with our story. I don't want to deal with this. And I want us to ask ourselves, this aspect of this woman ruling over the animal, is the animal consenting to it, or is there an aspect of force? And we have already encoded that the word seat means to do what? To reign or to rule. So I want us to understand about reigning and ruling. So number one, when we speak of reigning or rule, how do you rule? There are four ways you can be a rule. Number one, it's through an army. So how do you reign through an army? It's where, let's take it in a basic level, in this country here. Are we together? So we have our president, we have the executive structure, all that. And on this country here, maybe we have a coup. Are we together? And on this coup, an army decides, let me just give the first one. There are many examples you'd give because there is the army, there is the revolution. I want to distinguish all of them. There is the aspect of advisory. And the fourth one is through a coup. I'm going to give the first one, like what America has done. If you are following the external news, what has happened? Trump goes to Venezuela. Okay, depending on who you ask. If you ask Maduro, what does he say? I was kidnapped. I am the president of the Venezuelan Republic. So I was taken away from my country I'm a prisoner of war. If you ask Donald Trump, what does Donald Trump say? I arrested a criminal. And what is Trump wanting to do? He wants to rule over Venezuela, and there is a possibility of sending a what? An external army, American soldiers, an external army to rule over Venezuela. So the Venezuelan people will be ruled by an external army, right? That's the first perspective of reigning. So there is a nation called USA ruling over Venezuela using their what? That's the first perspective. The second one is through a revolution, where people, this is internal, where people internally rise. A good example is Nepal, yeah? Haiti. What are people saying? We are tired with this government, we rule ourselves, right? So the people rise, take up arms, and they rule themselves. So in Haiti, we still don't have a well-established government. Most of the people rule themselves through gangs and faction groups. So that's the second example of ruling. People take up arms through a revolution. The third one is through an advisory. So where we have a president or a king, and this king is being influenced by a higher being or a higher hierarchy, where whatever the king does, it's not independent mindset, but the one who is where? Above. So this is where you have someone sharing his ideas through a hierarchy. Then you have the coup. I know this is easier, where you have, it's internal, but now this internal, it's an army, not an external army like US, but internally, like, let me see a country where there is a coup. Burkina Faso, right? Where, what is his name? Traore. So he decides, I don't like this president. I'll just take up arms against my nation, government, and overthrow it and be a rule over the people. So there are different ways in which you be a rule. And when you compare number 1, number 2, and number what? Number 4, this is through what? Force. But when you compare number 3, it's through what? I don't want to call it peace. Which word? Let me see whether I can have a word. I don't want to use consent. Okay, which word do I use? Opposite of force. Yes? Position. You can have the word. I really hope you get the point. I don't have the exact word to put it, but I hope you get my point. So you can be a ruler of a kingdom or someone through at least 4. So you need to pick one of the 4. Yes? Yes? Okay. The reason why I didn't put that, because a democracy is where power belongs to you. But this one is 2 entities, one ruling over the other. So are you getting my point? There is a woman here, or there is an entity bearing rule over the other. In a democracy, you don't have that dynamic. You only have one entity bearing rule directly to the people. So in this one, it's either someone has taken your power by force, coercion, or by coup. So democracy does not give me the aspect of 2 entities. They only give me one. Like Kenya, we have the president ruling independently, bound by the constitution, what it says, right? But if the president begins to get influenced by another entity, they become 2. We wouldn't call that democracy. We would say that the president is being influenced by an external force or an internal force. So in the external force, we need to ask ourselves, is it an army? Is it through ideas? Or if it's internal, is it through people taking up arms and a revolution? or is it through an army internally taking over? So I know it exists, but it does not fit in this storyline of someone bearing rule over the other. So we are trying to understand, I bear rule over you, on what grounds? Is that democracy really? Democracy is where you have an independent entity bearing rule without being influenced by anyone. Maybe you would say just by the constitution or the rule of the land. But in this story, we want to understand two entities that are controlling one another, and we want to ask, this entity that controls this, is it ruling through consent or persuasion, or is it through force? Because you can see that these kings should maybe rule through a democracy. All presidents rule without being influenced by another force, be it internal or external. But in our story, it seems to be they are being influenced by another force. Are we together? So the moment they get influenced by another force, we are asking ourselves, who is influencing them? Is this influence through any of the four examples that I've given? I don't know whether I try to answer your question, or is there anyone who understands what I'm trying to explain? So, where was I? So, you are saying persuasion. Let me just put all of them. Is that the spelling of consent? So, what I want us to see, when you come to this aspect of force, you'll realize that the king can be removed. In number one, like Venezuela, the king is removed. In number two, revolution, like in Haiti, the king is removed. In this one, Burkina Faso, the king is removed. But in number one, the king does what? The king does what? Stays. And in this story, the woman exhibiting control over the kings of the earth, is the woman removing this entity of the kingship, or is the woman allowing the king to stay? She allows the king to what? So the question we need to ask ourselves, why? Why the woman allows what? Allows the king to stay. And what is the answer? I want to be a rule over the people, but I want to get through the kings. So will I remove the kings, or I will allow the king to stay? Are you getting my point? So the reason why the woman allows the king to stay, it's because it is only through the kings. It's only through the kings that she does what? She bear rules over the what? Over the people, what I'm calling the inhabitants. So the kind of rulership that I want us to see here is that the woman sitting, which you are saying it's to be a rule or to reign, is that the woman advises the king. And the ideas that the woman shares with the kings, these ideas end up being adopted by the people. The people end up getting drunk by the ideas. I hope you know wine is doctrine, or ideas, whatever you want to interpret that to be. So it's like a pattern. It's the woman. The target audience is the what? Is the people. But to get to the people, you need to get to the what? To the kings. And when John tells us, come here and I will show you the judgment of the whore, before John is shown the judgment of the whore, first John is told what the woman did. The woman sits or rules over the people, and you rule over the people through the kings. Are we together? So you have to influence the kings to go directly and influence the people. And that is the story that verse 1 and verse 2 is trying to share with us. And if you come back to the question I asked here, why would God use this story of a woman and a beast? And by looking at the properties between a woman and a king, I want us to go back to Daniel and look at Daniel chapter 2. So in Daniel 2, we have a story of the same subject, kingdoms, and this is the story explained through gold to what? Iron and clay. So when you observe in this story, God is going to use minerals to explain this story. Because God wants to teach us a lesson. What is the lesson, Jeff, that God wants to teach us through this story? Daniel 2, using minerals. So the first one, the first story is that there is the degrading concept. All these minerals lose value. Any other? Yes? They also increase in what? They degrade in value, but they become what? So by the time you come to the fourth kingdom, based on Daniel, you expect to see the fourth kingdom or what? Now, carry the thought, you know they are not four. How many are they? So what do you know of the seventh? It's the what? It's the strongest. Can you really see that? So you need to understand. You're saying no. There are four kingdoms. So the fourth kingdom is the strongest of the four, right? But how many kingdoms are there? Yes? In this context, Daniel is revelation. So you know number 5, 6, 7. The 5 is more stronger than 4. 6 is more stronger than 5. And 7 is stronger than all of them. Yes?
How do we know 7 is strong? 5 is stronger than 4 and 6 is stronger?
Daniel gives you half of the story and gives you how many testimonies? 4.
What she's saying is when it gets to the fourth, now clay comes in. And it's now partly strong, partly weak.
Yes, but I'm dealing with the partly strong.
So what do we do with the weakness?
Yes, because the partly clay is teaching us a different lesson. It's not teaching us of the issue of if we are saying that it gives us two lessons. The first one is degrading in value, right? It degrades in value progressively. And the second one is what? Strong. So despite the fourth being partly clay and partly iron, Daniel does not give us 5. Daniel says 4. It's your perspective. I am not saying you are wrong, but Daniel gives us 4. Daniel says, I saw how many beasts? 4. So the other aspect you are bringing in is you are making, not Daniel. And I'm saying, if this is what Daniel says, number 4 is stronger than 3 and 2 and 1. True or false? So whether it's partly clay and partly strong, it's still the strongest when you compare with the 4. And I'm saying, if there are 7, not 4, then you know the 7th is the strongest. It's logic. But the aspect of clay, where I'm going now, why would God use clay and iron here? What lesson do you want to learn from that? Because I'm saying it's the same lesson you want to learn from here. By nature, they can't mix. True or false? So God wants us to see there exists a strong kingdom that has two properties which can't mix. Are we together? By nature, they are diverse and different. Clay and iron, can they mix? Actually, it says, is it mild or migranol? What is the name? That name. What does that mean? You go and do your research, and you know why the Bible uses that word specific, not just normal clay. It uses a specific type of clay because God wants us to see a lesson. Two things by nature that can't mix. Two entities by nature, they are what? Different. And the lesson that God wants us to see through the interaction of a human being and a beast is that there is a co-working here, a co-existence here, which has something to do with rulership between two entities that in one perspective, they are very different. They all have different agencies. They think differently, they act differently, but one seems to control over the other, And that aspect of control is not through force, it's through what? You said persuasion. I will buy that word. Someone want to say something before we continue? I have how many minutes? 15. So that was just trying to explain better about verse 2 and verse 3. So we have a woman here whose main objective is to control the people. But this woman cannot directly control the people. The woman has to go through kings. And that is the concept given here. Now, our purpose was to understand where the prophet does what? Stands. So we continue from there. Where is John standing in history? Because in verse 1 and 2, John is just told, come here. And we ask ourselves, where? And I will show you the judgment of the whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of our fornication. So you can see the kings commit fornication, but the inhabitants are made to drink. And so verse 3 tells us where John is taken. The angel told John, come where? Here. So John has now to go, and it is in verse 3 where John goes, the place we call here. And where is John taken? So verse 1 is here, come here, and verse 3, John is taken. Where is John taken? Wilderness. So you need to understand where is the wilderness that John is taken. Because John says, I was taken in spirit. He time travels to the wilderness. And when he's taken in spirit, now John can see what he was told to see. So what is the first thing John sees? I was taken in the wilderness, and what did I see? So what was the angel intentions at the beginning? I will show you the what. And the first thing John sees is what? The woman. And now sees the woman doing what? Seated on a what? And from verse 3 onwards, John is going to have a better description of how the woman looks like. I saw the woman sit on a beast full of names of blasphemy. This beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman is arrayed in purple. So John is going to describe to us what he sees on the woman. The way she wears, everything she's decked with, gold, precious stones, all those things. Upon her head there is a name written, Mystery Babylon. And verse 6, John sees the woman what? Drunk, past, with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when John saw the woman, what will John do? He marvels. And then the angel says to John, why did you marvel? I will tell you, now John, I will tell you what? The mystery of the and the beast that carried her, which has 7 heads and 10. So John is told, to cut the story short, come here. I'm going to show you the judgment of this woman here. The woman who controls people through the influence of the kings. John is taken. John now, I would say John goes to where the angel tells him, and he sees the woman and describes how the woman looks like. And when John sees that scene, John marvels. And the angel tells, why did you marvel? I assume in my mind, I might be wrong, John is surprised. Like he's trying to uncode what all this means, and John cannot understand. And that's why maybe the angel says, don't marvel, I will show you what that mystery looks like. And from verse 8, the angel begins to break down everything as John saw it. The angel is to tell John about the beast, the angel is to tell John about the heads, and the angel is to tell John more about the woman. Are we together? I hope that is okay. I have 10 minutes. So, what I want us also to see, as I put it here, that Revelation 12 is 13, is 17. So you need to see if they are the same story. Whatever place John stands in 17, I'm suggesting is the same place John stands in 12, is the same place John will see in 13. Are we together? So when John is in 13, in 13, Revelation 13, where John stands, what does John see? What does John see? A beast coming out of the what? Out of sea. Are we together? And when you look at 13, how many beasts are there? 2. He sees a beast out of the sea, and he also sees what? A beast of the what? Of the earth. So you can see a beast on the sea, a beast on the earth. When you go to 12, where is the story taking place? Where is the story taking place? In the wilderness. In 12, John can see the controversy between a woman and a what? A dragon. The story is taking place in the wilderness. And when you come to 17, the story, John is taken back to their what? Wilderness. So you can see it's the same. When you have this, the whole story unlocks. You can really see the story of chapter 12. And actually, chapter 12 gives you first where the war began. Because when you go to 12, from verse 1 to verse 5, it addresses the dragon lying in wait to devour the seed of the woman. And verse 6 tells us, where does the woman flee to? Where she has a place prepared for 1,200, for 1,203 score days. And then verse 7 will give us a flashback of where the story began. The war began where? In heaven, between Michael and his angels, and the dragon and his and his angels. And the war ends up in verse 12, when the dragon is cast down to the earth, and those who are in heaven are told to rejoice, but there is an woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. To the inhabitants of what? The earth and the sea. For the devil is come down to you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he has but a short time. Verse 13 resumes the story. When the dragon saw that he was cast onto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man's child. So verse 13 now explains more the first portion from verse 1 to 6. And the woman was given 2 wings, where she might fly into the wilderness, into a place, nourished for times and half a time. You can really see verse 14 is verse 6 of 12. And the serpent cast out his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that she might cause her to be carried away by the flood. Verse 16 speaks about who? The earth, which helps the what? The woman, by opening her mouth to swallow the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon is so wroth with the woman. So Revelation 12 gives more direct glimpse of this controversy between the pure woman and the what? And the dragon. Revelation 13 gives us more deeper glimpse between this beast itself, this one, which is the first beast of the sea, and it also tells us that from where John stands, 2 beasts rise at the same time. As he sees the sea beast, he also sees the beast of the earth. And then Revelation 17 now expounds more better about this story of the beast and tells us, by the way, there is an human entity. And you can really see the angel is telling John more about the woman. And I said, when you come into this story, here you are shown that it is the 7 heads with a crown, it is the 10 horns with a crown, and I'm saying, what must you know? There must be a what? Who has the crown? Who has the crown? It's the woman. The story is about the woman. So one tells us 7 heads will be a rule. The other one speaks about the 10 horns. But this one, this crown is one word. Give me the word. It's on the board. Give me the word. Which word? Yes? People have the answer, but they are Nimesikia jibu lakini mtu hataki kushout. What is the word? It's to sit or to rule, all that. It's the woman who has the crown. So Revelation 17 is telling us it's the work or the time of the woman. It's more focusing on the woman. So you know there is a crown everywhere. But in 17, who is the focus? It's the woman. Are we together? So it's the woman who exacts power to the kings. The kings are under, I wanted to say state capture. It's not a good word. But you get what I'm trying to say. The kings are into subjection to a higher entity called the what? The woman. So they are just there, but someone is on top of them. So who has the crown? It's the woman. So my time is up. It's a woman. My time is up. I really hope I have the next class. We'll pick from here. We will go systematic and now ask ourselves, where is John standing? From where John stands, what can John see? And as we go bit by bit, we'll end up trying to understand more, not just the history of the first, second, third, but we'll more understand the history of the what? The seventh kingdom. And once we come here, we'll not try to answer your question, who is the woman? Because I said here, if you look at this history of the fifth, what do you have? You have a woman, right? You have a woman sitting on a what? A beast. And what also do you have? What also do you have? A head. Remember, Revelation 13 is Revelation 17. In Revelation 13, who is wounded? The head. Si ni kweli? In 17, who is wounded? The beast. Si ni kweli? The beast that was, is not, shall come. Si ni kweli? 17 deals with this. 13 deals with who? You need to combine all those stories. So we will try to understand more about the dispensational view that John gives us. Understand more about the fifth. And we will later come and understand about the seventh. And you will now understand who is the woman, who is the beast, and who is the head. And that's what I was saying. If you remember, there are no, as Nyama was trying to have thoughts, they are not different entities. Like we have a woman, a beast with different heads. These heads are part of the beast. And this can show you that it is the fifth head that is wounded as it is the fifth beast that is wounded. But we will get to that in our next class. I really hope it is sooner. Because, anyway, just a short recap and then we end. So we are trying to understand about the rise and fall of kingdoms. The reason why this is a present truth, we know that it is part of what will test us in our dispensation. We need to understand better about the history of the seventh kingdom. But we need to first generally understand all the seven kingdoms. We need to see how they behave, how they interact. We need to know that number 7 means completeness. And when you look at the characteristics that are in number 7, what do we call this? Literal Babylon, right? What do we call this? Mystery Babylon. So you know that there are properties that are here that we see here. So it's important to understand all the 7. So what we did today was to just lay some groundwork. We are saying Daniel is revelation. Daniel gives you 4 kingdoms. Revelation gives you the other 3. So there is a reason why the Bible says 7. We know there are many examples in the many stories or many prophecies in the Bible which uses the concept of number 7. 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 thunders, 7 trumpets, 7 vials, all that. There is a reason why the Bible uses number 7. Number 2, we tried to demonstrate how Revelation 12, 13, and 17 are the same. They aid each other in giving us a complete perspective of the story. Some concepts are in 12, others in 13, others in 17. You need to combine them all. When you come to the Revelation 17, John, and the same with 13. In Revelation 13, John uses the panoramic view in verse 1. He only speaks of a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. He does not focus on the dispensation in verse 1, but when he gets to verse 3, he focuses on the what? On the dispensational view. Because 13 is not dealing with the beast, 13 is dealing with the what? With the head. But when you go to 17, it's the same story, gives us the panoramic. He does not now focus on the head, he focuses on the what? On the beast. You need to combine all these thoughts to see the perspective. Then, as I said, the story does not just begin here. The story begins in heaven. Revelation 12 is a good example that when you combine it with Genesis 3, this is where the controversy is first seen on earth, but the controversy began in heaven. So these stories of kingdoms, it's in heaven, what we have is just a power struggle. Lucifer versus Michael, two different ideologies in war. It's the same story, two different ideologies in war. It's two different ideologies in war. This is the story of the great controversy that we are dealing with. If we are in this last history of the earth's existence, we need to have a better glimpse of how the great controversy began and how the controversy will end. We need to know where the prophet stands. Unfortunately, we just began, but I was able to lay some groundwork to show. When you go to verse 1 and verse 2, you need to realize that the woman or the whore is to receive some judgment because she has done something. The woman has made the inhabitants to drink her doctrine. How has she successfully made people drink her doctrine? It's through these kings. The kings were given the mandate to rule over the people, but they fornicate. You'll now need to go and uncode what fornication means. And through fornication, they give away their property to the who? To the woman. That is the story we see in verse 1 and verse 2. And then, I think that's the groundwork we have tried to lay here. And then we wanted to ask ourselves, if the woman sits, what is the meaning of the word sit? It's to reign, it's to rule, it's to have control. How does this control look like? Are given examples of how control looks like. It's either through an external army, like what we are seeing the seventh kingdom trying to do to other nations. It's either through a revolution, an internal, like what we have seen in countries like Nepal and Haiti. It's either through advisors, nations that are being influenced by a higher being. Maybe you would say Europe. They seem so toothless to say anything against what America says. Maybe it's through advisor, it's through a coup, an internal overthrow. And we are saying the first 1, 2, and 4, they show force. A king is removed or toppled from power. But for that option, the king stays. It's consent or persuasion. And there is a reason why the woman will not use this, but this. Because the woman wants the king to stay. It's through the kings you can exact control. If you remove the kings, you are not directly connected to the what? To the people. And it's through kings that she rules over the inhabitants or the people. Then we give the example. God wants us to see this story, that every parable, every story has a lesson. In Daniel 2, there is a reason why God would use minerals to teach us 2 lessons. There is a reason why God would use sacrificial animals in Daniel 8. There is a reason why God would use wild beasts in Daniel 7. Each has a lesson. There is a reason why God will use a relationship between an animal and a human being, because God wants to teach us a lesson. And then, where we will begin from our next class, we want to create more groundwork and establish where is the prophet standing, because this will be important for us. Where John stands in history, John will be able to see 3 different dispensations. He will be able to look backwards and see the past. He'll be able to look at the present where he stands, and he'll give us information about the what? About the future. So it's imperative and important to get it right where the prophet stands for you to be able to encode the other verses that follow in the story of these kingdoms. So I'll stop there. Maybe you have questions, we can deal with them in Q&A. So I'll invite you for closing prayer. Sabine, will you stone me? Okay. Okay, a good one. People can think I don't have an answer so far. So we'll pray. Almighty God, we are grateful for this wonderful moment to come and reason together, understand your word. We ask for guidance. Give us the right tools to uncode and dig out these hidden treasures. Many have aspired and desired to know these truths. We also desire the same. We believe there are truths that concern us in the present world we live today. We ask that as we continue juggling our mindsets, to be able to uncode this figurative language for us to actually see how the world looks like openly in our eyes and be able to amend our character in the line that you'd want us to. As we go for break and lunch, we ask that you may bless our food. As we eat it, let it be of help to us physically, mentally, and even the other incoming classes that we will have. We ask that you may continue being with us, continue enlightening us, give us answers to the unanswered questions and thoughts in our minds, and clarity too. I pray this until the end of the Sabbath. We believe you'll be with us. In Jesus' name I pray.